mid 2022 felt like a real low point for a lot of people, and so we completely doubled down on almost exclusively focusing on events and bringing people out to the tap. We had to pivot, 6 different times to kind of figure things out.
Eddie, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, we're sitting in an arcade right now.
Yeah.
In a brewery.
Yeah. Almost like a speakeasy arcade. Like, it's on the outside of the bathrooms, and like there isn't a lot of signage, which we thought would be kind of cool. It'd be like, oh, like people would like discover it along the way, but I think we need more signage.
Well, I like how it's like a speakeasy arcade because it's like a pleasant surprise when people check out Peabody and they come in here, and then it's like, man, there's a whole arcade in here. Like, and we're obviously, the cameras are only catching the background here, but this is a giant arcade.
No, 100%. So we have 70 arcade games in here, and we have kind of like a mix of like retro, sort of like your 80s, like Galaga. But we also have like independent, like new games like Killer Queen, and we also have like a lot of like really quirky, like Japanese like rhythm games. So there's a lot of games in here that are actually only playable on site on the East Coast, like here at Peabody, which is super cool. We have like a racing game called like Initial D. There's a drumming game, which I think might be the only one on site in the United States, which is really cool.
Wow.
So really cool stuff happening here, which is really awesome. It's honestly been like a childhood dream of mine, which is really cool because you get to like run a business and you're like, oh, let me do this thing stupid. And you're like, no one's going to stop me. Great.
That's awesome. Yeah, Gage and I were here a couple weeks ago, and we came in here to check it out, and then we were just planning on stopping in for a quick beer, and 3 hours later and like 70 rounds of Mortal Kombat later, we were like, we got to reach out to them and do a podcast.
Nice.
So,
Did you get the fatality?
We what?
Did you guys get the fatalities? Those are kind of tricky.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh yeah.
We were testing out a whole bunch of different characters.
Oh yeah. Of course.
It was a blast. But on that note of having an arcade in your brewery, that's obviously very different.
Totally.
And I haven't seen that before. So tell me about why you decided to do that, and has it paid off? What has been the business impact of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, just strictly from just like my own, enjoyment and like, kind of get to define what I want in a business and a brewery. Just to be honest, is that the brewing industry is changing. I think like historically people have always come to breweries to try unique beers and come out for, new releases. And unfortunately, it's just kind of changing. And so I think people are wanting to come to spaces that are interactive, that have more things going on than just, drinking at like an industrial park, right? And so we've always been like really kid friendly, and that's been really cool. As I've got to see, kids grow up from babies to like now almost 10-year-olds, which is really crazy. And so we've always been really kid friendly, and I've always kind of felt for those kids because I've been, as a kid growing up, dragged to a million places that I didn't want to go. And I think that like, the arcade was really special because it kind of hit on the nostalgia factor for I think a lot of adults, but also I think it's such a cool opportunity for I think parents and children to like be able to share that together and sort of like and not do it like at home on like a laptop screen or at their house like on another screen or an iPad.
Yep.
And so I think it brings in that sort of experience-based value that I think that like is really important to people. And but yeah, it's been going really well so far. Obviously, I think 80% of our business probably happens on the weekends. Mm-hmm. I think that like we are working on trying to get the word out there more so about the dugout being here.
Yep.
Because I think that like we have so many people that know of us, and I think that they haven't made the connection that there's an arcade of this size in the brewery, which is really cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I know we're telling a bunch of people about this because
Appreciate it.
it's to your point. It's such a cool and unique experience, and that's one of the things that we find with a lot of our breweries that we work with is the ones that are successful. Really, there's two things that we find. You know, if you really start ramping up the marketing side of things, other than having great beer,
Yeah.
there's two things that factor into making your advertising successful. One is, do you have food?
Yeah.
Because a big complaint from customers is like, you know, they kind of look at breweries sometimes as like a brewery is like just a restaurant without food.
Yeah.
If they go to the tap room. So
Yeah.
you
But
guys
they have to bring their own food in and like,
yeah, it's
you know.
just kind of it's a hurdle to get over to attract people there. So you guys do have a food truck all the time.
Yeah, so we have Fuzzy's Burgers. They're here Wednesday through Sunday. They also famously have a stand at Oriole Park as well.
Yep.
They are known for their smash burgers, fried chicken, falafel burgers. They actually won best burger in Baltimore 2 years, I think 2 or 3 years back to back, which is really cool. Yeah, they just have a really amazing following. They have really good marketing, and it's really just convenient for us because now they're like, I think it's a cross promotional draw, which is really helpful, and it's great. They're there. They always are serving. They turn product around really fast, and they know what it's like to get in the weeds.
Yep.
They have that, experience from like working at like a large baseball stadium.
Yep.
And so, we throw a lot of really big events. And so like sometimes, with food trucks is that like those kitchens are tiny. And so having to turn product around quickly is a hard thing to do as a food truck. And so I think like, the hurdle for a lot of breweries that even have food trucks on, weekends is that like, it could be an hour and a half wait for like a burger and fries.
Yeah.
And, for Fuzzies, they can knock it out in 5 to 10 minutes sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all the times I've had Fuzzies, it's been amazing. And and that's huge that you have a reliable food truck partner because I know a lot of breweries struggle with that. So I think that's one of the things that you guys do really well is just consistency and finding a good food partner to rely on. So that's a big benefit to the customer. But then also having something unique like this, like an arcade. Because I think a lot of breweries, even when they have food, they still kind of fall into the trap of failing to differentiate themselves in a meaningful way. And I feel like with this arcade, it's like now there is a clear difference between Peabody and all the other breweries around where it's like, okay, this is something cool, this is unique. And it just makes you stand out, which I think is a huge driver to actually attracting a crowd.
I think that's a huge part of it, right? Is that like things are becoming so more experiential and like, I think that like we've all collectively as breweries have been kind of selling this sort of like come drink in like this, industrial part of town, drink some beers and then go home after that, right?
Yep.
And so there's not always things that are like in those immediate areas that are always just like exciting to go to. So I think that like having it be more of a destination, give people the opportunity to like want to stick around for more than just like 2 beers, right? And I think that like we're creating space that like I think, and you often hear a lot of times too is talking to brewery owners is that like it's really amazing to be a part of the community and to be family friendly and then like but like sometimes we love having families and children here, but they're impressively destructive sometimes.
Right.
And so like I've seen tiny little kids just like rip apart like furniture. I'm just like, that's impressive. I'm a little frustrated, but just like, I think that like giving them an opportunity for the entire family to enjoy themselves. And like, we have regulars that come here like every Friday. They grab a burger, they go to the arcade for an hour. Sometimes the parents will switch off so they can go hang out with their friends.
Yep.
And so, I think that's like the future really. I think that like unfortunately, and I think why people need to consider organizations like yours is that like, unless you're doing all these creating engaging content, creating engaging events and like a place to be, then like you're really going to start to struggle, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what we've experienced, is that we are extremely event focused, and we are continuing to think about new projects along the way that will continue to bring people out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you guys are doing an awesome job. Just the creativity behind everything is
Thanks.
really cool to see, and something that you don't see often. So yeah, kudos to you guys.
Well, I appreciate it.
So I watched a speech that you gave. I think it was earlier this year. I forget the name of maybe Creative Space or something was the name
Creative
of it.
Mornings. Yeah,
Creative
yeah,
Mornings,
for
yeah.
sure. They're amazing.
Yeah. So I watched that, in preparation for this, and one of the things that you mentioned early in that speech is that you guys, not too long ago, or I guess it was maybe 2 years ago now, were at a point where you actually put the business up for sale,
Yeah.
and it seems like
Yeah.
you've bounced back from that pretty
Completely,
nicely. So
yeah.
what got you to that point, and how did you kind of fight your way out of that spot?
100%. Yeah, I think that talking to a lot of my peers, is that that mid 2022 felt like a real low point for a lot of people. People that you would never consider possibly closing were like thinking about like whether or not they were gonna make it going forward. I think that like we had distribution contracts, and so we were initially like a really large scale production. Like we've always been like historically low key. We were producing probably like anywhere from 8 to 10,000 barrels of product that we were selling out the door to wholesale. And so we are, we've had a tap room, but our main focus was distribution. And then pandemic hit, and like even though we were continuing to sell a bunch of beer, it just wasn't sustainable, just because we were constantly trying to figure out like, oh crap, the cost of aluminum went up by 30% randomly because this one weird thing happened that we had no concept of or could manage, right? And so you can't fluctuate your pricing as things happen. And so we had a series of really bad luck that kind of put us in a really tight spot. And so I think for us, and thankfully we have had a lot of like long-term relationships with all of our suppliers, and we're just like, hey, we have no money. We're and to be honest, is that like I'm not sure if you guys remember, but there was the Asia Collective Night Market over in Howard County that they sold 30,000 tickets. And I was like, amazing. I am the only beer vendor for this like Asian night market. This is super exciting. Like this, I basically maxed out all of our credit. And like I was like, perfect. Like we're gonna sell $100,000 worth of beer at this event. We're gonna kill it. Like I've got an entire tractor trailer load full of beer. Like this will solve all of our problems. And I'm not sure if anyone saw the news about that whole situation. It was really, really bad. So like only 6,000 people really could make it to the event. It blocked off 70 in both directions. The food lines were like an hour to 2 hours long. People like had been in traffic, and then finally made to the venue. And then all of a sudden, like it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I mean, like there was people passing out because there was enough like sun coverage, and like emergency vehicles couldn't get to the event because all the roads were like blocked off because people started driving down the sides of the road. And so like it was just and
sounds like Fire Festival.
Yeah, I mean it was close. It was definitely thankfully no one had to like spend $1,000 to get there, but it was crazy. And so I think from that experience it was just like we need to figure something out. Like I knew that like the brewery was for sale, but like I still had to keep the doors open if we found like a real buyer. And I also didn't want to really put it out there that we were for sale. I wanted everything to be through NDAs, and so that way like I could figure out the process. But nothing really came of it. I think the people that are interested in buying breweries are typically other breweries. And if the market's in a really bad spot, no one's really interested in buying a brewery. Yeah. And so we just completely changed who we are. And so we completely doubled down on being almost exclusively like focusing on events and bringing people out to the tap room. And that just like slowly allowed us to like build out of that whole thing, And so I think that like a lot of breweries and a lot of us is that we had to pivot, 6 different times to kind of figure things out. And so, yeah, I mean, our events allowed us to continue to build. It gave us time to work with Department of Housing and Community Development to refinance our building and get additional funding so we could build out this space and eventually redo our bathrooms as well. And so, yeah, it was just our main focus as a business now is entirely bringing people into here because it's so much easier to sell, to make 400% margin selling someone a beer across the bar than it is to make maybe 5% margin on selling 100 cases of beer,
right?
And like the amount of work that you put into that versus what you could be doing in your tap room is night and day, honestly.
It seems like every brewery that we speak with is going down the exact same road where they used to have a heavy distribution footprint. The market changed, things got more expensive, suppliers increased costs, and now everybody is shifting their strategy towards taproom.
Yeah, completely.
So do you ever see distribution being a big play for small craft breweries, or like do you see it coming back? What are your thoughts on that?
Not necessarily. I think that I think it's still helpful for people to have their beer out there just for honestly, just marketing purpose, just so you get more information, out there to people. Like someone buys a beer, they now know who you are as a brewery. They can look on the back of the can and find out, like Google Peabody Heights Brewery and find out, hey, what's going on over there? And they're like, oh my God, there's, this whole space. There's Fuzzy's Burgers. There's an arcade, a beer garden, live music, all these things. I should go check them out. This beer was pretty good, but this space looks really cool. And so, building customers that way is helpful, but I think that real marketing involves with just focusing heavily on just a lot of digital marketing because that's probably your best bang for your buck right now. And then also just community engagement events. Yeah. And so wherever breweries are, I think that and for any starting brewery or for a brewery that's kind of shifting their focus to go into this kind of route that we've gone, is that just go out into your immediate 1 mile radius and figure out what's going on, figure out what your community wants, and create that space. Because we're not large corporations that need to appeal to everyone.
Yep.
We should, focus on the 80% of people that are going to come back every week and provide a space to them that they care about, that they value, and create things that are appealing to them.
Yep.
And that's, I think, was proven to be successful for us. And also just I think that small breweries need to take the time to hire someone who only focuses on whether it's events or marketing, because it goes a long way. And sometimes it's hard to see that return, but it always works out typically, as long as you hire the right person in that role.
And so from a event standpoint, I know you guys are super involved in the community and you do a lot of different types of events. Sure. And I can't remember the exact events that you mentioned in that speech that I was referencing before.
Sure. Yeah.
But I remember just being like, that's another reason why they're successful, because these events they're not your typical trivia night. You guys totally do a lot of cool, kind of different, unique things. So what are you doing there? What's the secret sauce on the event side of things?
I think that I think at its core is focusing and this kind of goes back to building community, is that the more that you create a space that's welcoming to your immediate community, you're gonna have people reach out to you about wanting to do cool stuff that they care about. And so I would say probably 80% of the events that we host are already mostly planned by someone else. And so I think that what I've learned over time is that create an event and it can be the most niche thing ever, but if you do a good job marketing it and talking about it and sort of saying how you're involved in that niche community, is that you end up being successful just because you capture the audience of that community, but you also capture the audience of other people being I have no context about about VHSs and vintage like
That was the
physical
one.
media,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, and people are just like, people are I think just fascinated, and so you'll just get people out just to figure out what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a very key element of having success with events. We have a brewery that we work with down in Georgia, and one of the things I really like about their brand in particular is they're very like conspiracy theory oriented.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of like aliens in their branding, and so we'll create ads around like it's like a scientist at a desk being like, did we really land on the moon? And it's just so like it kind of sticks out.
100%. It's quirky. It's funny. I'm sure a part of it's also like spoofy kind of as well. Like, it's not taking itself too serious.
Yeah, exactly. And I think customers are looking for that kind of a different vibe, different experience than just like, hey, come on in and try our beer.
We have a new hazy double dry hopped IPA.
Right,
Sick, cool. What's this, the 30th one in the last 2 months?
Yeah, every brewery came out with a new hazy IPA.
Yeah. Or like it's wintertime, we have an imperial stout with marshmallows. You're like, all right, cool. Like I've had that beer 10 times at this point.
Right. So it's like you got to mix it up. You got to try something different, and do things like vintage VHS events, something that just people don't see every day.
Super passionate about that stuff, and like, we and through that like VHS festival, we also were put in contact with like Lost Footage Festival, which also hosted a part of it that had like they wherever they go they sell out 200 seats. And so before this was an arcade, we had this entire space like turned into like a movie theater, and like people are like, and I had no idea about these things, and like it's cool because like you get to realize that like what are things that people like to care about. And like we've done so many cool things that are hyper niche, and like they always bring out like a really large crowd of people. And I think that like
riches and niches.
Just like don't half-ass anything, and don't try to like think about like what will not appeal to someone, or like what will like potentially like I wouldn't say piss off. I mean like just don't do anything that's like dumb to like offend people, right? But I mean like I think for us is that like we are very much like unfortunately I think like today things are so politically like separated, and like you're kind of on one side, and like and I think for us, and like this isn't good marketing for everyone, but like we're located in Baltimore City on the cusp of a very wealthy neighborhood and not a very wealthy neighborhood. Like we're 2 blocks away from Guilford, which has multi-million-dollar big mansions, and then we're also located on Greenmount Avenue, which has dilapidated housing, a lot of it vacant. And not to take away from Greenmount, there's a lot of incredible things happening here that a lot of other amazing small business owners are also happening. But like the dichotomy is massive, and so I think that like we've kind of decided to stand for things that we care about, and it's definitely alienated us from a certain certain political demographic. And sometimes you just have to make that choice to go that route. And like it's not always right for certain places, and sometimes it's tough depending on the area of the country that you exist in, and like but people care when you care about things that they care about. And I think it really shows, and you create space for that, right?
I think that it's awesome that you actually made a conscious decision to do that, because that's an aspect of marketing that sometimes I think so many people and so many brands are afraid to take that jump of saying, hey, here's what I stand for and here's what I don't stand for on either side of the spectrum. And that is actually what builds a loyal kind of cult-like audience.
100%.
If you look at just like, some of your favorite brands, one of the key elements of them is they tend to be a little bit polarizing. They're for a certain crowd, and they're definitely not for another crowd. And that's kind of how you actually build that following. And,
100%,
I love that you guys were actually aware of that and chose to go that route, and it looks like it's paying off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, I think that, like, it's, for us, like, our by far our biggest event is this, like, mostly, like, lesbian, queer, trans, like, dance party. And we get, like, 600 people outside dancing, their ass off.
That's awesome.
To these two JJs. And it's, like, this incredible experience of just, like, seeing this just, like, queer joy. It's really special. And to be honest, we're just mostly a bunch of straight guys here working. And the fact that, like, I mean, we're just not assholes about things, right? And so that's, like, all we had to do to create that community here. But like you say, like, successful organizations kind of choose, have decided to, like, kind of go the route they want to go, right? Like, and sometimes large corporations, they realize what's okay to go with, right? And so, like, you see this kind of, like, half-assed marketing where people are like, once I think that, like, it hit a critical mass, that, like, you see, like, LGBT rights and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, Procter and Gamble really cares about LGBT
right,
rights.
yeah, it's like come Pride Month, everybody's like doing it,
and you're like, but what we've found is successful is that, like, we care about the things we care about and we value those things, but we also, like, add value to that community, right? Like, we can't just say, like, we're here for, like, LGBT rights and sell, like, rainbow flagged, like, merchandise. Like, obviously that's something that we do, but, like, we create spaces, we do fundraisers for organizations that are beneficial to those communities in our immediate neighborhood. Yeah. And so I think that's what shows authenticity.
Yeah. Well, I think the key word there is authenticity, because I think one of the advantages that smaller businesses like small craft breweries have over larger corporations is that because the radius of the impact that they're able to have is more concentrated, that also means that it's a larger impact in that radius. It's 100%. More kind of densely spread, for lack of a better word, throughout that radius. And so people can actually see, like, okay, I get to meet, the owners of this brewery and the staff, and I can tell they actually care, as opposed to, like, a Procter and Gamble where they try to take a stand for something and it's like, okay, cool, this is just a marketing ploy.
And to be honest is that, like, there's 10 or so breweries in Baltimore, like, or in any given community or city at any point now. And so, like, people aren't forced to buy your product. Say, like, a Procter and Gamble. Like, when you buy, laundry detergent, you buy Tide because, you have Tide and then you have something that's not Tide, right? And so, and the not Tide's kind of sketchy and, like, it's not very good. And, they have to appeal to this large audience. Like, for us, is that, like, just appealing to, what we think will be successful and to that community, So the
takeaway that I'm pulling from this conversation is that for local businesses, where you're just trying to draw a crowd to your tap room or tasting room, I think there's actually a larger opportunity to increase revenue because you're in a smaller area if you take a stand for something that you actually believe in and can follow through with that in an authentic way.
100%. Yeah, I believe so. I firmly believe that, like, figuring out who your audience is and your demographic.
And who you are.
Exactly. Like, don't do something that, like, you don't believe in, that, otherwise it
just to make revenue.
It's kind of evil. Right. We see that enough. And, like, it comes off non-authentic, right? Yeah. Especially when you see, say, like, someone like myself as a small business owner kind of, like, unwavering in that, or, like, being or wavering back and forth depending when it's convenient, right? And so people kind of see through that, and especially, like, smaller communities like Baltimore as a whole. Like, Baltimore is a small city, like, it's and people know each other, and so things travel fast, and so being authentic and caring about the things that should be important are I think are very valuable. Because, like, a lot of us don't have big marketing budgets to do the traditional marketing.
So I want to shift gears here for a second. No, you're good. That was awesome. I want to shift gears here for a second. So another thing I was reading on Peabody is that your parents originally purchased the brewery, right?
Yeah.
And they came from South Korea?
So my mom is South Korean. She
Okay.
came from South Korea, I believe in like 1975, actually.
Okay.
And so has lived in Baltimore her entire life. Has ran a business in Baltimore with my dad for the last like 30, 40 years.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And so when did they purchase Peabody?
They purchased Peabody in late 2014, I believe.
Okay.
I've been involved since, I'd say, mid 2015. I've been kind of running the day-to-day since 2016, 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So what spurred their decision to purchase Peabody? You know,
How'd that happen?
How did it all happen?
Oh, man. To be honest, is that, my dad worked in the beverage industry for a long time. He used to repack. Have you ever been to like a BJ's or Costco where they have like different variety packs of like sodas and stuff like that? And so he did that for like vitamin water and Pepsi, and so like that's really kind of where he was successful for a really long time. The original owners of the brewery reached out to him because they found out that he had equipment that was useful for the brewery. And then he started talking to them and then realized they were pretty much out of money. They were probably going to be bankrupt in like a couple months, which for anyone out there, I would strongly recommend not buying a business that is about to go bankrupt. There are some pretty obvious
That's
signs.
solid advice.
Do not do it, even though no matter what, you think that you can turn things around. And a lot of people have.
And
But
you guys did.
we did, yeah. It was not the way I would recommend doing it, right? If you have a sum of money to like potentially do something, and the problem too is that like it takes time to figure out like what's successful in any type of business. But yeah, he was able to buy the brewery from the original owners just so they could get out and not lose their shirt. And so basically, I think my dad believed that he had one more in him.
Yeah.
To run a business, and that was a good opportunity for me and him to work together. Working with family is tough. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. If you're considering opening up a business with any family member, it's tough. And so thankfully, I think he at times has a lot of respect for me, and so I think he's allowed me to do the things that I've done.
Yeah.
To do the things I've wanted to do. And which I think is, I have the luxury of being able to do the things that we've done because we have no investors. We have no people telling us like, hey,
huge.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And so like I have a place of luxury where like I don't have like my board of directors saying like, hey, maybe you shouldn't market this way because you're not appealing to the wider audience.
Yeah.
But I think that we know now that like what it takes to be successful not as a corporation is to find those key audiences and demographics. But yeah, it was just a really good opportunity. So yeah, Peabody is founded in nepotism. No, I'm very lucky. I feel very, very lucky, honestly. And I try to do everything I can to be successful here and do best by my employees and keep trucking as long as possible. To make sure that everyone has a job here, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it seems like you're doing a great job. I mean, everybody, from what I can tell, everybody seems to love you, and it seems like things are going well.
It's a small town, and we try to I just try to do right by people as best as possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that way, but we try our best.
So, you guys purchased it in 2014, around then, and it was about to go bankrupt.
Yes.
And then it sounds
for the first time.
yeah. Well, then you guys built a pretty big distribution footprint.
Yeah.
And obviously you had some challenges that were outside of your control around 2020. And I know you even mentioned like that freeze in Texas where the labeling ink company was located. Like crazy things happened, which put you in a difficult spot
Always
again.
happening.
But then you crawled out of it. So that first time you bought this business, it's 2014. It's about to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
What did you do to turn it around?
the brewery was mostly a contract brewing, and so it brewed beers for other people. That mostly made it a manufacturing facility. And, to be a manufacturing facility for large scale production, you have to kind of do everything perfectly. And anyone who runs a craft brewery, it's really, really hard to do that because you're working with like small versions of equipment that like Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola uses. So like, those guys spend millions of dollars on packaging equipment and trying to put that technology into something that costs a multiple fraction of that is kind of hard to do. And so, what we realized pretty quickly is that the margins were pretty tough. And so we started brewing, we decided to make our own brand. And so, and honestly, like, I think in the beginning, my dad had, experiences in other businesses, but nothing sort of as customer facing as this one. And so, he had some old school ideas and they just weren't working. And like really, the Peabody Heights brand was kind of like a last ditch effort for the brewery to be successful. Is because, we had tried a couple things, they definitely weren't working. And, I had a really great brewer here that is now our director of brewing operations that's been with me for actually longer than I've been here. So almost 10 years. And his name is Raul. He's brilliant. He's kind. He's, our whole brewing staff is really, really incredible. And I think that like for a lot of people that know of us, they like see all the things we're doing as events and like, but we make what I believe to be really, really good beer. And that's, kind of made us successful in the beginning. Is that we were releasing beers that I think really appealed to sort of the beer-focused community from back then, which was kind of driving craft beer at the time. And so we had large economies of scale because we're such a large brewery. And so, I learned quickly that I needed to sell a lot of beer really quickly because that was our only chance of trying to make it long term. The thing is that like we were a contract brewery in 2012 through 2014, but like, 95% of our customers, did not have breweries, and now they have breweries. And so, when we first started here, we had Full Tilt and Monument City, Antietam Brewing and Diamondback and Appalachia State and Fin City Brewing. A lot of those guys built breweries, and so our customers, I kind of saw the writing on the wall that like our customers were also taking that next step for themselves to like build their own breweries. And so I realized that like we needed to find a way to compete in the changing market.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic when it's like your customers kind of become your competition.
Yeah. And we have a lot of respect for those guys.
Yeah, there's room for everybody in the market.
There's plenty of room, honestly, for sure. And I think that like, truly, I think that like more breweries, attracts like brewery tourism, honestly. We're within 10 minutes of like, call it 4 different breweries. And like I know that people come out of town, they're like, oh, I should go here, and then like I send them off to like Nepenthe or to Union or to Wet City or all those guys that are around the corner from us.
I saw I heard an interesting take on this. I feel like I bring up Jeff Bezos every single podcast episode. I'm not like a Jeff Bezos fanboy, but he's a smart business guy.
He makes $1 billion every day.
So one of the things that he said was people get really consumed with competition and they look at their direct competitors, and he was like, I actually don't worry a whole lot about competition because it's not necessarily your competitor that will put you out of business. Industries as a whole tend to rise and decline together.
100%.
So it's like if all breweries are doing well, then you're going to do well. If all breweries are not doing well, you're not going to do well. But it's not going to be the brewery down the street that puts you out of business.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, unless they like physically do something, they come here to poison the air.
Right.
Things are so like off the wall crazy that are like just impossible to happen, right? I think that like the thing to pull from that is that like, is that the industry doing well as a whole really uplifted a lot of us. And I think it gave opportunity for new breweries to be founded. And also that there's so many people on our side of the industry talking about how everyone should be drinking better beer. And, I think it kind of like opens up the picture that like, hey, like come hang out here for a beer. Like, and, hey, we've done collaborations with this brands, like go check them out, see what they're doing. They just opened up, like, we love those guys. They make good beer, like go over there. And so, I think that, I think like the main goal is to focus on yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone's going to have highs and lows, and sometimes it's really easy to get wrapped up in the jealousy of that, right?
Yeah.
And so, but what's the point of that? Like, we're small business owners. Like, we have too much going on to focus on that stuff.
On other people. Yeah.
100%.
It's like
Yeah.
focus on you and support those around you.
Yeah. And the people you like, if they need help them out.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, last question that I want to wrap up
absolutely.
with. What is the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Honestly, one that comes up so often, that it took me like 10 times to like really listen and care about, is that being able to control the things you can control and like try not to stress yourself out about the things you can't control. I mean, like unfortunately the pandemic was such a massive thing that, I think for a lot of us, we were probably in like a year, 2 year, 3 year rut of just like constantly just feeling exhausted and frustrated and angry. And, I think that like I was so much more successful when I was thinking about the next pivot than when I was thinking about how crappy things are. And so I think like, there's so much more success that way. Like bad things will continue to happen to your business because that's what happens in a small business. There's a million terrible things that have happened to us that like don't even get mentioned. There's things that we just deal with, right? And so I think like trying to focus on the positives of your business and figuring it out, right? Because like you have to figure it out. There is unfortunately a clock ticking. And you can't just like stall. And kind of dwell in that. You just gotta figure it out. Just gotta keep
figure
going.
it out or go out of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, this was an awesome interview. I really appreciate you,
thank you for taking
coming
the time.
on. And again, like this is the coolest brewery I've ever been
I
to. So
appreciate that.
this is awesome. Great work.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. There's a lot of great breweries out there, and we're glad to be a part of Baltimore. There's a lot of really cool things happening here, and it's a great city. I think it gets a bad rap, but we have really, really cool people doing cool stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I've lived in Baltimore for over 10 years now, and
sneaks up on you, doesn't it?
Yeah, man, that's crazy.
I'm just gonna live here for a year too. I'm gonna test the
it's
waters.
like I guess I'll go to Baltimore, and then you fall in love with it, and it's great.
Well, I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life, and I'm a diehard Orioles fan.
Right. Yeah. Ravens, Orioles.
All in. Yeah. Just has a way of just holding on to you.
It does. Yeah.
You love it or you hate it.
Yeah. I'm a lifelong Baltimore guy now, so it's and happy to be one.
It's a great town, and you're working on helping other small businesses, and that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I think like you see more of this happening in cities with like people who care, right?
Yeah.
We're a city that's much less transient than like say DC. No offense to DC, but we're the better city.
That's right.
It's just true. Yeah. No, I think that like it's just how community forms, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, thanks so much. This was awesome.
Oh yeah, of
and
course. No, thank you guys.
We'll be back to drink some beer here.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Cool.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.